So we're back in Sketch again. What I've done is I've broken down each one of our paper prototype states or steps into their own artboard in Sketch. So that's step 1, step 2, all the way to step 8. You're probably thinking we didn't have 8 steps. Well, every time a user has an interaction, we want to break that down to 2 separate states. So if you remember when they'll select the payment method, they're deselected, so you can't continue until someone has actually tapped something. Once you've tapped it, you move on to the actual fully continuable state. So each step needs its own state in the actual prototype. So when we're actually creating this in the InVision, you need to take that into consideration as well. The actual final design that I've got, you can see there's some red lines. That's just simply the guidelines to make sure that everything is consistent. So we have the logo, we have coffee delivery people waiting to take our order, we've got the actual user and an input field that someone taps. So someone taps that, they get the current location, they can select that, they can choose from the menu of the different types of coffee. Again, we can't continue until they have. Now that they have, they can continue, then moving on, they can customize. In this prototype, we're not going to customize, so a user can continue. Then they choose the payment method. Again, they can't continue until they actually select something. So we select MasterCard, and then we can review the order, and then finally someone can actually buy. So I've also added edit buttons as we did before. In this flow, they're not going to do anything, but you could possibly make them do something in another prototype. Again, we want to make sure that the flow that we're focusing on is very clear. So that's all about focus. Otherwise, what could happen is you could end up making the prototype a lot more complicated and confusing later on. So that could be a flow within itself. So a user taps buy now, and then finally they're on the confirmation page. Now, one thing I've added that was slightly separate from our confirmation originally was a map, because I wanted the user to see the coffee being delivered to them. Again, this is all about feedback, reassuring the user. Like just having text on its own, a user wants to see what the status is and be updated every step of the way. So yeah, that's the actual design that we have. Now let's create the prototype. But before we do, I just want to quickly jump in and talk about icons. So these are the icons that I've been creating. Generally speaking, when I'm creating icons or any kind of creative elements in Sketch, what I'll do is I'll create a separate file, iterate, explore in there, and then go back into the final UI folder. This at least gives me a sandbox to play without adding too many elements to the final layout. So again, what you can see here, I've made the different coffee shapes. One small thing I wanted to bring up was masking in Sketch. If you're more familiar to Adobe type software, which a lot of graphic designers will be, masking in Sketch is a bit weird in that typically Photoshop, Illustrator, etc., the mask starts from the top and then everything inside of a folder or a containing element will be masked. In Sketch, it's the reverse. So if you want to make a mask, you right click and then you select mask and then everything above it will be masked. The other thing is you want to make sure when you are creating your masks that you contain them into a folder. Otherwise, anything that's above this mask will be masked. So the whole page could end up being masked by this simple thing. But building up shapes is really simple. If, say, I want to recreate the latte shape, I'll just make 2 rectangles, copy, paste that, make that smaller. If I double click, bring points in, bring that point in. Again, the same thing, bring that point in, bring that point in, and then maybe I might make that a bit shorter, and select both items, create a union, and then that's the shape. I want to get rid of the border. And one thing to point out, when you combine shapes together in Sketch, they're actually you're still able to manipulate and edit them. So that's a really cool feature. Once you're happy, so say if I want to actually move this up a bit, I'll just with the arrow keys move it up, and then once I'm happy, say I'm happy with that shape, I just create flat, or I tap on flatten, and then it becomes its own vector. So I just want to bring that up in Sketch. There's a lot of cool things and features that you can explore later on, but yeah, one thing, always make sure of masks. That always trips me up. So let's go back into the UI Sketch file and start building the prototype.